My mother abandoned me for my stepbrother for 20 years. Now he lost everything and demands my inherited house. But my revenge was slamming the door in his face and calling the police when he tried to threaten me. I'm 28 years old. I work in accounting. And honestly, I need to get all of this off my chest, because what happened a few months ago still has me processing a lot of things about my childhood and my family that I thought I had already overcome. But I guess you never really fully get over certain things, you know? The thing is that my stepbrother, Trevor, who's like 34 now, contacted me after literally 2 years of not talking to ask me for a huge favor. And all of this basically unearthed my entire childhood and the horrible relationship I always had with my mom, Michelle. I should start from the beginning, I guess, so you can understand why I reacted the way I reacted and why my family now thinks I'm basically the devil. My mom remarried when I was like 6 or 7 years old. I don't remember exactly. To a guy named Jonathan. My biological dad had died when I was really little, like 3 years old, so I don't have many memories of him, but I always knew he had existed and that my mom had loved him, or so I thought. Jonathan had a son from his previous marriage, Trevor, who was 6 years older than me, so when they got married, he was like 12 or 13 years old, already almost a teenager. From the moment Trevor moved into our house, everything changed completely. And when I say everything, I mean everything. My mom, who up until that point had been a normal mom, I mean, nothing exceptional but not bad either, became a completely different person. The favoritism was obvious from day one. Trevor could do whatever he wanted, literally whatever he wanted, and my mom always found a way to justify it or ignore it. I could get straight A's in school and my mom would barely say, "Well done." But Trevor could fail 3 subjects, and she would organize a special dinner because he was going through a hard time with his parents' divorce, which had happened like 2 years before. But whatever. If I asked for help with homework, my mom would tell me she was busy, but Trevor could interrupt her at any time, and she would drop whatever she was doing to help him. If I needed her to buy me something for school, like supplies or whatever, my mom would sigh and say we had to wait until the next paycheck. But Trevor always had the newest sneakers, the video games that had just come out, everything. But the worst part, what really destroyed me for years, was how Trevor treated me and how my mom did absolutely nothing about it. He bothered me constantly, called me fat. He wasn't fat. I mean, I was a normal kid, but that didn't matter. Hid my stuff, pushed me when he walked past me. And when I complained to my mom, she would tell me I was exaggerating or that Trevor was just playing around. Once, I was like 10 years old. Trevor threw my school books into the backyard where it had rained and they all got ruined. And when I told my mom crying, she asked me what I had done to provoke him. Can you believe it? As if I, a 10-year-old girl, was responsible for a 16-year-old teenager, acting like a jerk. Jonathan, the stepfather, basically didn't exist in my life. He never did anything directly bad to me, but he never defended me either. He was like a piece of furniture in the house. He was there but didn't participate in anything that had to do with me. All his conversations were with Trevor. All his plans included Trevor. And I was like the ghost who lived in the back room. My mom had met Jonathan at her work, I think, and I guess she was so desperate to have a complete family again that she decided Trevor was more important than me because he needed a mother figure after the divorce. I told her once, I must have been like 11 years old, that I also needed a mom, and she yelled at me that I was ungrateful, that she had always been there for me, that I had no idea how hard it was for her to raise a girl alone after my dad died. The irony is that she practically stopped raising me the moment Jonathan and Trevor arrived. The things my mom said to me during those years still hurt when I remember them. She constantly compared me to my biological dad, and not in a nice way. She told me I was selfish, just like him, that I was problematic, just like him, that I was never going to amount to anything, just like him. I didn't even know my dad, so how was I supposed to defend him or defend myself from those comparisons? I once asked her why she said those horrible things about him if she supposedly had loved him, and she told me that love ends when people disappoint you, and it became very clear to me that I had disappointed her too, just by existing. There were days when Trevor would do something, like break something in the house or get bad grades, and somehow my mom would find a way to blame me, saying that I distracted him or that I put everyone in a bad mood with my attitude. The only ones who really loved me and made me feel important were my paternal grandparents. I mean, my biological dad's parents. They visited me often and always noticed that something wasn't right at home. My grandmother would ask me why I looked so sad, and I at first tried to pretend everything was fine because I was afraid my mom would get angry if I complained. But eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I was like 13 years old when I finally told them everything. I cried like I had never cried before, and my grandparents were furious. They talked to my mom. There was a huge fight, and in the end, my grandparents offered for me to move in with them. My mom at first said no, that I was her daughter and she wasn't going to let them take me. But my grandparents told her that if she didn't let me go voluntarily, they were going to look into legal options because what was happening in that house was emotional neglect. I don't know exactly what else they told her, but my mom finally agreed on the condition that I would visit her some weekends. Obviously, I never went to visit her, and she didn't insist much either. Living with my grandparents was literally like starting a new life. They treated me like I mattered. They asked me how school went, not because they had to, but because they really cared. They cooked my favorite meals. They helped me with homework without making me feel like I was a bother. My grandmother taught me to cook. My grandfather taught me to fix things around the house, and for the first time in years, I felt safe and loved. My grades improved a lot. I started making friends at school, something I had never been able to do well before, because I was always so depressed and anxious. And I basically became a different person. My grandparents paid for my entire college education. They supported me in whatever I wanted to study, and when I graduated like 6 years ago, they were the only ones there at my graduation ceremony, clapping like crazy and crying with pride. My mom, Jonathan, and Trevor didn't come to my graduation. My mom had told me she was going to come, but the day before she called me saying that Trevor had an important matter that weekend and that she had to be there to support him, so she couldn't come. She didn't even give me details about what that important matter was. She just said I should understand that Trevor needed her. Honestly, I wasn't surprised, and it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Because by that point, I had already accepted that my mom had chosen Trevor over me a long time ago, and that was never going to change. My grandparents tried to cheer me up that day. They told me they were proud of me, and that's what mattered, and they were right, I guess. When I was 25 years old, like 3 years ago, my grandparents started getting sick. My grandfather was diagnosed with cancer and my grandmother with heart problems, basically at the same time, and it was horrible to see them deteriorate so quickly. My grandfather died first, and my grandmother followed him like 4 months later. People always say that couples who have been together for many years sometimes die close to each other because they can't live apart, and I think that's what happened with them. They were married for like 55 years and they really loved each other. When they died, they left me their house and all their savings, which wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to have a good financial cushion and not have to worry so much about money. In the will, they made it very clear that everything was only for me, nothing for my mom, because according to my grandfather, he told the lawyer before he died, my mom didn't deserve a penny after how she had treated me. My mom obviously got angry when she found out about the will. She called me crying, saying it was unfair, that she was their daughter, technically she was their daughter-in-law, but whatever, that I had brainwashed them against her, a whole soap opera. I told her it hadn't been my decision, that it had been my grandparents' wish, but she kept insisting that I should share some of the inheritance with her, for being her daughter. I asked her if she was joking. I reminded her of all the years she ignored and mistreated me, and I told her I didn't owe her absolutely anything. She hung up, and we didn't talk for almost 2 years after that. Honestly, it was 2 years of peace. But anyway, that's where the recent part of all this drama starts. Like 3 months ago, I received a message from Trevor on Facebook. We hadn't talked since my graduation, basically, and before that, we hadn't had much contact either, after I moved in with my grandparents. The message was super long and basically said that he and his daughter, Abigail, she was like 4 or 5 years old, I think, were being evicted from their apartment because he had lost his job and hadn't been able to pay rent for several months. He said my mom and Jonathan couldn't help him because they were also going through financial problems. You don't know what kind of problems. They never told me. And honestly, I didn't care much. And that he had thought of me, because he knew I had that big house from my grandparents. He asked me, and I quote, verbatim, because I still have the message, if he and Abigail could move in with me, temporarily, until he found another job and they could get their own place. He said it would only be a few months, that he would help me with household expenses, that Abigail was a very quiet girl and wouldn't be a bother. I read that message like 5 times because I couldn't believe the audacity. This guy, who made my life impossible during my entire childhood, who bothered me and made me feel like garbage constantly, who never defended me even once when my mom treated me horribly, was now asking me to let him live in my house, the house that my grandparents left specifically to me. I replied that no, that I was sorry about his situation, but I didn't feel comfortable with that idea. I tried to be as polite as possible considering all the history we had, but I basically told him no. Trevor didn't take my response. Well, he started sending me messages, saying I was selfish, that how could I leave his daughter homeless, that I lived alone in a 3-bedroom house while they were going to end up on the street, that he was my brother, and that family helps each other. I told him that he had never treated me like a sister, that he had never helped me when I needed help, and that the fact that we were technically family didn't mean I owed him anything. He got furious and told me I was still living in the past, that he had been just a kid when all that happened. He was 13 years old when he moved in with us. He wasn't exactly a baby, and that I should get over it already. He also said something that really made me angry. He said that my grandparents had spoiled me, and that's why now I was so cold and ungrateful. After that conversation with Trevor, I started getting messages from a bunch of relatives I didn't even know, had my number or my Facebook. Aunts, uncles, cousins of Jonathan that I had seen, maybe twice in my life, all sending me messages telling me I should help Trevor, that a little girl was going to suffer because of me, that how could I be so cruel? That family is the most important thing. Some messages were like, concerned, trying to make me feel guilty with that condescending voice of, I know you've had your problems with the family, but now is the time to be the bigger person, and others were directly aggressive, telling me I was a horrible person and that I was going to regret it. I blocked most of them because I wasn't going to put up with people who never cared about me now, telling me what to do. The thing is, I started feeling guilty. Not about Trevor, honestly, because he's an adult, and his decisions led him to that situation. But I did feel bad about Abigail. She's a child who's not at fault for anything, and the idea that she could end up homeless made me feel horrible. But at the same time, I knew that if I let Trevor move in, it was going to be a total disaster. He was going to take advantage of the situation. He probably wasn't going to leave in a few months, like he said. And I was going to end up basically supporting a guy who made me suffer for years. My friends, when I told them all this, told me I shouldn't let them manipulate me with the child thing, that Trevor was using his daughter as a tool to get what he wanted, and that I had every right to protect my space and my peace of mind. A week after all that bombardment of messages, my mom showed up at my house. She hadn't told me she was coming. She just knocked on the door one Saturday morning. When I opened it and saw her standing there, I froze because it had literally been 2 years since I'd seen her in person. She looked older, honestly, with more gray hair and more wrinkles. But her expression was the same as always when she wanted something from me, that mix of frustration and desperation. She asked me if we could talk, and I honestly didn't want to let her in, but I also didn't want to make a scene with the neighbors watching, so I let her in. As soon as I closed the door, my mom started with her speech. That Trevor really needed help. That Abigail was my niece. Technically stepniece, but whatever. And that I should care about her. That I had this huge house thanks to my grandparents. As if that was a reason to share it with Trevor. That how could I be so selfish after everything the family had done for me? I asked her, trying to stay calm, what exactly the family had done for me. She started stammering something about how she had given me a roof and food when I was a child, and I told her that's literally the minimum a parent should do for their child, that it wasn't any special favor. I reminded her of all the years of favoritism, all the emotional abuse, all the times she chose Trevor over me, and she started crying, saying I always exaggerated everything, that she had done the best she could in a difficult situation. I told her I'm going to let Trevor move into my house and that I needed her to respect my decision. My mom wiped her tears and completely changed her attitude. She got cold and told me that if I didn't help Trevor, she and I were no longer going to have any relationship. I told her we practically didn't have any relationship anyway, and that if she wanted to cut all contact with me for not doing what she wanted, go ahead. She told me I was going to regret it, that someday I was going to need my family and no one was going to be there for me, and I asked her to leave my house. She stood there like waiting for me to change my mind, but when she saw I wasn't going to give in, she left, slamming the door. 2 days later, Trevor showed up at my house. I was in pajamas on a Tuesday night watching Netflix after a long day at work, and suddenly I hear someone knocking insistently on the door. When I opened it, there he was, and he looked angry. He started yelling at me right there at the door, saying I was selfish, that he had tried to be polite asking me for help, but now he realized I was just as bad as he had always thought, that my grandparents had left me that house, but I didn't deserve it because I was a horrible person. I told him to calm down or I was going to call the police, and he laughed and told me, "Go ahead, call the police, let's see what they're going to do." He started saying he had as much right to that house as I did because he was also part of the family, which didn't make any legal sense or any kind of sense. And when I told him to leave or I really was going to call the police, he told me I was going to pay for this, that I was going to regret treating him like this. I closed the door with the lock and called the police anyway. When they arrived, Trevor had already left, but I made a report of what had happened and explained to them that I felt threatened. The officer was kind and suggested I consider putting in security cameras, something I honestly should have done before. That night I couldn't sleep well. I stayed awake thinking about everything Trevor had said and whether I was really doing the right thing. I kept thinking about Abigail and where they might be sleeping, but I also knew that letting Trevor take advantage of me wasn't going to help anyone in the long run. Like a week after Trevor's visit, I woke up one morning and when I left my house to go to work, I saw that the entire front was covered with eggs. They had thrown eggs at my door, at the windows, at the car that was parked in the driveway, basically at everything. I was furious. And although I didn't have direct proof of who it had been, I obviously suspected it had been Trevor or someone he sent. I called the police again, they took pictures, made another report, and I decided that was enough. I hired a company to install security cameras around the entire house, with views of the entrance, the backyard, the sides, everything. I also put better locks on all the doors and made sure all the windows were always locked tight. My mom called me like 2 days after the egg incident. She didn't ask me how I was or anything. She just told me she had heard about what happened and that I was exaggerating everything as always, that it had probably been neighborhood kids playing pranks. I told her I didn't think it was random kids, that obviously it had been someone who was angry at me because of this whole situation, and she told me that if I would just help Trevor, none of this would be happening. I interrupted her and told her we needed to not talk for a while, that I couldn't keep having these conversations with her where she blamed me for everything and where she expected me to sacrifice my peace of mind for people who never cared about me. She told me that if I cut contact with her, I wouldn't be able to come back later, and I told her I understood and that I was willing to accept that consequence. She hung up, without saying goodbye. That was like 2 months ago. Since then, I've blocked all the relatives who keep sending me messages, including Trevor and my mom. The security cameras haven't captured anything suspicious since I installed them, so I guess Trevor realized he couldn't do those things anymore without there being evidence. I don't know where he and Abigail are living now, and honestly, I've tried not to think too much about it because every time I do, I feel guilty again. But my friends, my therapist, yes, I started therapy like a year ago to process all the childhood trauma. Everyone tells me I did the right thing, that setting boundaries with toxic people doesn't make me a bad person, that the fact that we're biologically family doesn't mean I owe them my house or my life. Sometimes I wonder if my grandparents would be proud of me, or if they would think I should have been more compassionate. But I think they would understand. Honestly. They saw how I was treated. They were the ones who rescued me from that situation, and they specifically left that house for me, not for my mom or anyone else. That was their decision, and I'm respecting it. I've also realized that my whole life I was seeking my mom's approval, wanting her to see me and value me, and that never happened. Trevor was always her priority, and now that I'm an adult and can see things more clearly, I realize that wasn't my fault, that there was nothing I could have done differently to earn her love. She chose to favor Trevor from the beginning, and that was her decision, not mine. Last week, a neighbor asked me if everything was okay because she had noticed the new cameras. I vaguely explained to her that I had had some problems with family and that I was just taking precautions. She was very kind and told me that if I needed anything, she and her husband were there to help. It was nice to feel that there are people who care without expecting anything in return, without judging me for decisions I made to protect myself. I've been focusing on my work, on my friendships, on maintaining the house my grandparents left me, on building a life that's mine and isn't contaminated by all the drama and toxicity of my family. It's not easy, and there are days when I feel lonely, especially because my grandparents are no longer here, and they were really the only people in my family who loved me unconditionally. But I'm learning that family doesn't have to be just the people you share blood with, that you can create your own family with the people you choose, with people who truly value and respect you. I don't know what's going to happen in the future with my mom or with Trevor. Part of me hopes that someday my mom will realize how she treated me and maybe try to make amends, but another part of me has already accepted that's probably never going to happen. And that's okay, I guess. I don't need her validation to know I'm a good person, that I made the right decisions for me. My grandparents taught me that I deserve to be treated with respect and love, and I'm not going to accept less than that from anyone, not even from my own mother. This house is my sanctuary now, the place where I can finally be myself without fear of being judged or rejected, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me.